The wind screamed through the canyon like 1,000 banshees. As Theodore Owens gripped the reins of her broken wagon, feeling another contraction tear through her body with enough force to make her cry out into the frozen darkness. The wheel had snapped an hour ago somewhere between Sheridan, Wyoming and the ranch she had been desperately trying to reach before the blizzard hit. And now she sat alone in November of 1885, 9 months pregnant, and terrified beyond measure as snow piled against the canvas sides of her wagon with relentless fury. Her husband James had died 3 months prior in a mining accident, leaving her alone to face this pregnancy without the comfort of his steady presence. And she had been traveling to her sister's ranch when the storm caught her unprepared. The horse whinnied nervously in the traces, stamping its hooves as the temperature continued to plummet, and Theodore knew with absolute certainty that if help did not arrive soon, neither she nor her baby would survive the night. She had pulled a blanket around her shoulders, but the cold seeped through every crack in the wagon's wooden frame, turning her breath to fog and making her fingers numb despite the gloves she wore. Another contraction built slowly, a tightening sensation that started in her lower back and wrapped around her entire abdomen like an iron band. She counted through it, breathing as steadily as she could manage, trying to remember everything the midwife back in town had told her about labor. The contractions were coming closer together now, maybe 10 minutes apart, and she knew with growing horror that this baby was coming whether she was ready or not. Her supplies were limited to a single blanket, some rope, a knife, and a canteen of water that was already beginning to freeze. She had never felt more alone in her entire life. The sound of hoofbeats cutting through the howling wind made her lift her head sharply, hope and fear warring in her chest. Through the swirling snow, she could barely make out the shape of a rider approaching, his dark coat covered in white powder, his hat pulled low against the brutal weather. The man dismounted quickly, tying his horse to the back of her wagon before climbing up to the covered seat where she huddled. "Madam, I saw your wagon from the ridge," he said, his voice deep and steady despite the chaos around them. "Are you hurt?" Theodore looked up at him, taking in his weathered face and kind brown eyes, the strong jaw and the concern etched into every line of his expression. He appeared to be in his late 20s, maybe 30 at most, with dark hair that curled slightly beneath his hat and broad shoulders that spoke of years of hard work. "I am in labor," she managed to say, her voice shaking. "The wheel broke and I cannot go any further. The baby is coming." She watched his eyes widen slightly, saw him process this information with remarkable speed. Most men would have panicked, would have stammered and backed away from such a situation, but this stranger simply nodded once and began removing his coat. "My name is Kenneth Stone," he said, draping the heavy garment over her shoulders. "I have delivered foals and calves more times than I can count, and I am not about to let you or your baby die out here in this storm. We are going to get through this together. You understand me?" Theodore felt tears prick her eyes at the firmness in his tone, at the absolute certainty with which he spoke. "Theodore Owens," she whispered, "but everyone calls me Thea." "All right, Thea," Kenneth said, already moving to assess their situation. "First thing we need to do is get you more comfortable and warmer. This wagon is not much shelter, but it is what we have. How far apart are your contractions?" "Maybe 10 minutes," she replied, watching as he efficiently began rearranging the limited supplies in the wagon bed. He moved with purpose, creating a more protected space by hanging an extra tarp to block the wind from one side. His hands were large and capable, and despite the dire circumstances, she felt a strange flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with the baby. Kenneth pulled off his gloves and tucked them into his belt before reaching for her hand. I need to know if you have any complications I should be aware of. Has your pregnancy been healthy? Any bleeding or unusual pain before tonight?" She shook her head, grateful for his straightforward manner. Many men would not have been able to even speak of such things, but Kenneth treated it as simply another problem to be solved. "It has been normal. The midwife said everything was progressing well when she examined me last week. The baby has been moving regularly." "That is good," he said, squeezing her hand gently before releasing it. "That is very good. Now I am going to build us a small fire just outside the wagon. We need hot water and warmth. Can you hold on while I do that?" Another contraction began to build, and Thea gripped the side of the wagon bench, nodding through gritted teeth. Kenneth watched her carefully, his gaze sharp and assessing, and she could see him counting silently. When the pain finally eased, he nodded. "You are doing well. I will be right back." She watched through the gap in the canvas as he worked quickly in the storm. Using the broken wagon wheel and pieces of dead wood, he had somehow found to create a small, sheltered fire pit against the protected side of the wagon. He got it lit with practiced ease despite the wind and snow, then positioned her largest pot over the flames. The orange glow of the fire was like a beacon in the darkness, and Thea felt some of the terror ease in her chest. She was not alone anymore. Kenneth climbed back into the wagon, brushing snow from his hair and shoulders. His clothes were damp, but he ignored his own discomfort, focusing entirely on her. "Tell me about your husband," he said, and Thea blinked at the unexpected question. "I figure talking might help take your mind off things between contractions. Plus, I should know your situation." "He died 3 months ago," Thea said quietly, her hand moving instinctively to her rounded belly. "Mining accident up in the hills north of Sheridan. Cave-in. They brought his body back, but there was nothing anyone could do. We had only been married a year." She saw sympathy flash across Kenneth's face, but he did not offer empty platitudes. Instead, he said, "That must have been terrifying, facing this alone." "It has been," she admitted, surprised by how easy it was to talk to this stranger. "I was traveling to my sister's ranch. She lives about 15 miles west of here, married to a cattle rancher. She said I could stay with them, help with the children in exchange for room and board. I did not have anywhere else to go." Kenneth was quiet for a moment, then said, "You will get there. We are going to make sure of that." Another contraction hit before she could respond, this one stronger than the last, and Thea could not hold back a small cry. Kenneth moved closer, offering his hand, and she gripped it hard enough that she knew it must hurt. He did not flinch, just kept his eyes on hers and counted aloud. "Breathe with me, Thea. In through your nose, out through your mouth. That is it. You are doing beautifully." When it passed, she was breathing hard, sweat beading on her forehead despite the cold. "How do you know so much about this?" she asked. "Grew up on a ranch in Montana," Kenneth explained, checking the fire through the canvas opening. "My mother was a midwife before she married my father, and she taught me and my sisters everything she knew. Said you never knew when such knowledge might save a life. I thought she was being overly cautious at the time, but I am grateful for it now." "Where are your parents now?" Thea asked, genuinely curious about this man who had appeared like an answer to a prayer. "My father died 5 years back. Heart gave out. My mother followed him within the year. I think she just did not want to be here without him." Kenneth's voice was matter-of-fact, but Thea could hear the old grief beneath it. "I have been working ranches ever since, moving around wherever the work takes me. Was headed to a job near Sheridan when the storm hit, saw your wagon and knew I had to check." "I am glad you did," Thea said softly, and meant it with every fiber of her being. The thought of going through this alone, of delivering her baby by herself in a broken wagon during a blizzard, was too terrible to contemplate. Kenneth had appeared exactly when she needed him most, and she could not help but think that perhaps James was watching over her after all, sending help when she was most desperate. The next hour passed in a blur of contractions that grew steadily closer together and more intense. Kenneth tended the fire, keeping water hot, and moved back and forth between checking on the horses and staying with Thea. He talked to her during the breaks, asking about her life before James died, about her family, about anything that might distract her from the pain. She learned that he was 28 years old, that he loved horses more than most people, that he had once wanted to have his own ranch, but never seemed to settle in one place long enough to make it happen. Why not? She asked during a brief respite, watching the way the firelight played across his features through the canvas. Kenneth was quiet for a long moment. I suppose I have been waiting for a reason to stay somewhere, a purpose beyond just work. Does that make sense? It does, Thea said, then gasped as another contraction began, this one so powerful that she doubled over. Kenneth was there immediately, his strong hands supporting her, his voice steady and calm as he coached her through it. When it passed, she looked at him with wide eyes. Something feels different, like there is pressure. Kenneth nodded, his expression serious. That means we are getting close. I need to examine you to see how far along you are. I know this is not ideal, but I have to know what we are dealing with. Thea nodded, too exhausted and frightened to care about modesty. Kenneth was professional and quick, his touch gentle despite his calloused hands. When he looked back at her, his expression was both concerned and determined. The baby is coming soon, maybe within the hour. We need to get you into a better position and prepare for the delivery. Fear clutched at her heart. I do not know if I can do this. Kenneth took her face between his hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. Yes, you can. You are one of the strongest women I have ever met, Theodore Owens. You survived losing your husband. You made a plan for your future. You have endured this storm and this broken wagon, and you are going to bring your baby into this world safely. I am right here with you, and I am not going anywhere. Do you trust me? She searched his face, seeing nothing but honesty and determination there, and felt something shift inside her chest. I trust you, she whispered. Good, he said, releasing her gently. Now we are going to do this together. He helped her move to the wagon bed, arranging blankets and their coats to create as clean and warm a space as possible. The fire was burning strongly now, providing both heat and light, and Kenneth had brought the pot of hot water closer. He washed his hands thoroughly, then knelt beside her, his presence somehow both calming and electrifying. The contractions came harder and faster now, each one building on the last until Thea felt as though her entire body was consumed by the effort of bringing her child into the world. Kenneth coached her through each one, his voice never wavering, his hands steady and sure. He told her when to push and when to rest, his experience with animals translating remarkably well to this very human situation. I can see the head, Kenneth said, and there was something like wonder in his voice. Just a little more, Thea. You are doing so well. She bore down with everything she had, crying out with the effort, and then suddenly felt a release of pressure. Kenneth moved quickly, supporting the baby's head, guiding the shoulders. One more push, he urged, and Thea gathered every last bit of strength she possessed and pushed. The baby slipped free into Kenneth's waiting hands, and for a moment there was nothing but silence except for the howling wind. Then, a thin wail pierced the air and Thea started sobbing with relief. Kenneth was already cleaning the baby's face with a cloth, rubbing its back to stimulate breathing. The cries grew stronger, more insistent, and he smiled. You have a son, he said, his voice thick with emotion. A healthy, strong son. He wrapped the baby in his flannel shirt, then placed the tiny bundle in Thea's arms. She looked down at her son's scrunched face, his dark hair plastered to his head, his tiny fists waving in indignation at his sudden entrance into the cold world, and felt love so powerful it nearly stopped her heart. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "I am your mama." Kenneth worked efficiently to finish the delivery, tying off and cutting the umbilical cord with steady hands, making sure Thea was stable and that the bleeding was normal. He covered her with every blanket they had, tucking them carefully around both her and the baby. "You both need to stay warm," he said. "The storm shows no signs of letting up, so we are going to have to wait it out here. Think you can manage? With you here, yes," Thea said, looking up at him with tears streaming down her face. "Kenneth, I do not know how to thank you. You saved both our lives tonight." He settled beside her, close enough that she could feel his warmth, and looked at the baby with an expression of such tenderness that it made her heart ache. "I have delivered a lot of animals, but that was my first human baby," he admitted. "Most amazing thing I have ever been part of. He is beautiful, Thea. Do you want to hold him?" she asked impulsively and saw surprise flicker across Kenneth's face. "You delivered him. You should get to hold him." Kenneth reached out carefully, taking the small bundle with surprising gentleness for such a large man. He cradled the baby against his chest, and Thea watched as her son's cries quieted almost immediately. Kenneth began speaking softly to the infant, nonsense words and gentle promises, and Thea felt something deep inside her chest crack open. This man, this stranger who had appeared from the storm, had not only saved their lives but was looking at her son with the kind of love that most fathers showed their own children. "What will you name him?" Kenneth asked, still swaying slightly with the baby. Thea had thought about this for months, had discussed it with James before he died. "James wanted to name a son after his father, but I think I want to call him Benjamin. Benjamin James Owens." "Benjamin," Kenneth repeated, smiling down at the baby. "That is a fine name. You hear that, Benjamin? You have a good, strong name to go with that fighting spirit of yours." They sat together in the wagon as the storm continued to rage outside, the fire providing warmth and light, and Thea felt exhaustion creeping through her limbs. Kenneth seemed to sense it, carefully handing Benjamin back to her before helping her adjust so she could nurse the baby. He turned away to give her privacy, busying himself with checking their supplies and making sure the fire would last through the night. "Kenneth," Thea said softly, and he turned back to her. "Will you stay close? I am afraid if I fall asleep I might drop him." "I will stay right here," he promised, settling beside her again. "Get some rest. I will keep watch over both of you." Thea let her eyes drift closed, Benjamin warm and safe in her arms, Kenneth's solid presence beside her like an anchor in the storm. She had never felt more protected in her life, and as sleep pulled her under, she found herself hoping that when morning came, Kenneth would not simply ride away and disappear from their lives. She woke several times during the long night, each time finding Kenneth still awake, tending the fire or checking on the horses. Once, she woke to find him holding Benjamin again, walking slowly back and forth in the limited space of the wagon to soothe the baby's fussing. He was humming something low and melodic, and the sight of this strong cowboy cradling her infant son with such care made tears spring to her eyes. "You should rest too," she murmured, and Kenneth looked over at her with a slight smile. "I will, once the storm breaks. Right now, my job is keeping you both safe and warm." "This is beyond the call of duty for a stranger," Thea pointed out, struggling to sit up. Kenneth immediately came to help her, supporting her back with one arm while still holding Benjamin with the other. "You could have just pointed me towards shelter and ridden on." "I could have," Kenneth agreed, carefully transferring the baby back to her. "But I am not the kind of man who leaves a woman in labor alone in a blizzard." Besides, I think perhaps fate put me on this road tonight for a reason." "You believe in fate?" Thea asked, intrigued by this idea. Kenneth considered the question seriously. "I believe that sometimes things happen that cannot be explained by coincidence alone. I have been wandering for 5 years, Thea, working ranch to ranch with no particular destination in mind. Then tonight, I took a route I do not normally take, at a time when I should have already been bedded down against the storm. Instead, I found him." He gestured to Benjamin. "Maybe that means something." Thea felt her heart beginning to race, not from fear this time but from something else entirely. "What do you think it means?" "I think," Kenneth said slowly, his eyes meeting hers in the firelight, "that I have been looking for a reason to stop wandering. A purpose beyond just the next job. And tonight, I delivered a baby boy into this world, held him in my arms, and felt something I have never felt before. Like maybe I was meant to be here. Like maybe this is where I am supposed to be." "We only just met," Thea whispered, but her heart was not listening to the logical part of her brain that said it was too soon, too fast, too impossible. "I know," Kenneth acknowledged. "And I am not saying anything has to happen right now, but I would like to see you safely to your sister's ranch. I would like to make sure you and Benjamin are settled and cared for. And then, if you will allow it, I would like to court you properly. To see if what I felt tonight when I looked at you both was real or just the intensity of the moment." Thea looked down at Benjamin, then back up at Kenneth's earnest face. She thought about James, about the love they had shared, and she knew he would have wanted her to be happy, would have wanted their son to have a father figure in his life. And there was something about Kenneth Stone that called to her on a level she could not explain, something that felt like safety and home and possibility all wrapped together. "I would like that," she said softly. "I would like that very much." Kenneth's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. "Then we have a plan. First, we survive this storm, then we get you both to safety, and then we see what the future holds." The storm finally began to break as dawn approached, the wind dying down to occasional gusts, and the snow tapering off to light flurries. Kenneth ventured outside to assess the damage, and returned with news that was both good and bad. "The wheel is beyond repair without proper tools, but the storm has passed enough that I think we can make it to your sister's ranch if you are strong enough to ride. It will be slow going with you and the baby on my horse and me leading your horse with supplies, but it is doable." Thea was sore and exhausted, but the thought of reaching her sister's warm home gave her strength. "I can do it," she said firmly. Kenneth helped her prepare, fashioning a sling from blankets so that Benjamin could be secured safely against her chest, beneath Kenneth's heavy coat. He wrapped her in every layer they had, then carefully lifted her onto his horse before swinging up behind her. The ride to the ranch took over 3 hours, with Kenneth setting a careful pace and stopping frequently to make sure Thea and Benjamin were managing. He kept one arm around her waist the entire time, supporting her against his chest, and Thea found herself leaning into his warmth and strength. They talked in fits and starts, sharing stories about their childhoods, their dreams, their losses. By the time the ranch house came into view, Thea felt as though she had known Kenneth for years rather than just one night. Her sister Mary burst from the house at the sight of them, her face a mixture of relief and shock. "Thea, oh thank God, we have been so worried. When the storm hit and you did not arrive, we feared the worst." Then her eyes fell on the bundle beneath the coat and her hands flew to her mouth. "Did you have the baby?" "This is Benjamin," Thea said, pulling the blanket back so Mary could see her nephew's sleeping face. "And this is Kenneth Stone, who delivered him in my broken wagon during the storm. He saved both our lives." Mary's husband Robert appeared behind her, and after quick introductions, Kenneth carefully helped Thea down from the horse. Mary immediately took charge, ushering her sister inside with rapid-fire questions about her health and the delivery. Kenneth started to step back to leave now that his duty was done, but Thea caught his hand. "Please do not go yet," she said urgently. "Stay for breakfast at least. Stay until you know we are all right." Kenneth looked at her with such warmth in his eyes that she felt it all the way to her toes. "I will stay as long as you want me to," he said simply. That breakfast stretched into lunch, and lunch into dinner. Mary and Robert, seeing the connection between Kenneth and Thea, insisted he stay the night in their guest room rather than riding off to find work. One night became 2, then 3. Kenneth made himself useful around the ranch, helping Robert with repairs and caring for the livestock, but he spent every free moment with Thea and Benjamin. Thea healed quickly, her strength returning day by day, and she found herself watching for Kenneth constantly, her heart lifting whenever he came into view. He held Benjamin often, with a naturalness that suggested he was meant to be a father, and the baby seemed to recognize him, settling immediately in his arms. Mary noticed, of course, and cornered Thea one afternoon while Kenneth was outside working. "That man is in love with you," Mary said bluntly, "and unless I am very much mistaken, you feel the same way." Thea blushed but did not deny it. "It is too soon, is it not? James has only been gone 3 months, and I only met Kenneth a week ago." Mary took her sister's hands gently. "James is gone, Thea, and he would not want you to spend your life alone out of some misplaced sense of loyalty to his memory. Kenneth is a good man. Anyone can see that. He looks at you like you hang the moon, and he looks at Benjamin like he is already his own son. If you have found something special, do not throw it away because you think it should take longer or look different than it does." Thea knew her sister was right. Over the following weeks, as November turned to December, Kenneth continued to stay at the ranch, and his courtship of Thea became more obvious. He brought her wildflowers he found on the range, even though they were scarce in winter. He carved a beautiful wooden rattle for Benjamin. He sat with her in the evenings and talked for hours about everything and nothing. And slowly, carefully, he began to touch her more, a hand on her shoulder, fingers brushing hers, a gentle touch to her cheek. The first time he kissed her, it was snowing again, light flakes drifting down from a gray sky. They were in the barn, and Kenneth had just finished teaching her how to properly curry a horse. He turned to her, snowflakes caught in his dark hair, and said, "I love you, Thea. I know it is fast, and I know you might need more time, but I cannot keep it to myself anymore. I love you, and I love Benjamin, and I want to be part of your lives if you will have me." Thea reached up and touched his face, feeling the roughness of stubble beneath her fingers. "I love you too," she whispered. "I did not think I could feel this way again, but you have given me hope and joy when I thought I would never experience either again." Kenneth lowered his head slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, but Thea rose on her toes to meet him halfway. The kiss was gentle at first, almost hesitant, and then deepened as Kenneth pulled her closer. Thea wrapped her arms around his neck and let herself fall into the feeling, into the rightness of being held by this man who had appeared in her darkest hour and brought light back into her world. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kenneth rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said urgently. "I know we have not been courting long, but I am certain, Thea, I have never been more certain of anything in my life. Marry me and let me be a father to Benjamin and let us build a life together." "Yes," Thea said without hesitation. "Yes, Kenneth, I will marry you." They were wed 2 weeks later in Sheridan's small church, with Mary and Robert standing as witnesses. Benjamin, now 6 weeks old, slept peacefully through the ceremony, bundled in his mother's arms. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Kenneth kissed Thea with such joy and tenderness that she felt tears streaming down her face. This was not the life she had planned, not the way she had imagined her future unfolding, but it was beautiful and real and more than she had ever hoped for after losing James. Kenneth used his savings to buy a small piece of land adjacent to Mary and Robert's ranch, and he spent the winter months building a house for his new family. It was modest but sturdy, with 2 bedrooms and a kitchen that caught the morning sun. Thea helped with the interior, sewing curtains and arranging their few pieces of furniture, and every night they fell into bed exhausted but happy, Kenneth's arms wrapped around her, Benjamin sleeping in his cradle nearby. As Benjamin grew, it became clear that he would be a strong, healthy boy with his mother's determination and a sweet disposition that charmed everyone he met. Kenneth treated him exactly as he would a biological son, teaching him to walk, playing with him for hours, rocking him when he cried in the night. Thea watched her husband with their son and felt her love for him deepen daily. He was everything she had not known to hope for, a partner in every sense of the word. In the spring of 1886, Kenneth landed a permanent job as foreman on a large ranch just outside Sheridan, which brought stability and a good income. They began to build their life in earnest, joining the community, making friends, putting down roots. Thea started a small vegetable garden behind their house and took in sewing to earn extra money. Kenneth continued to work with horses, gaining a reputation as one of the best trainers in the region. One evening in late summer, as they sat on their porch watching Benjamin toddle around the yard chasing fireflies, Kenneth took Thea's hand and laced their fingers together. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked quietly, "moving so fast with me?" "Sometimes I worry that I pushed you into something before you were ready." Thea turned to look at her husband, taking in his handsome profile and the concern in his eyes. "Never," she said firmly. "Not for one single second. You appeared when I needed you most, Kenneth. You saved my life and Benjamin's life, and then you gave us so much more than that. You gave us love and safety and a future I never thought we would have. You are the best thing that ever happened to me." Kenneth squeezed her hand, bringing it to his lips to press a kiss to her knuckles. "I feel the same way about you. I spent 5 years wandering, feeling like something was missing and I did not even know what it was. Then I found you in that storm and suddenly everything made sense. You and Benjamin are my purpose, Thea. You are my home." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching their son play, and then Thea took a deep breath. "I have something to tell you," she said, a nervous smile playing at her lips. "I am pregnant again." Kenneth's head whipped around so fast she heard his neck crack, his eyes wide with shock and joy. "Are you certain?" "Very certain," Thea confirmed, laughing at his expression. "I think the baby will come in early March." Kenneth let out a whoop of delight and swept her into his arms, spinning her around before setting her down carefully and dropping to his knees in front of her. He pressed his face against her still flat stomach, his arms wrapped around her waist. "A baby," he whispered reverently. "Our baby." Thea ran her fingers through his hair, her heart so full she thought it might burst. "Are you happy?" "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Kenneth said, looking up at her with tears in his eyes. "I get to be there from the beginning this time. I get to feel the baby move, to watch you grow, to be with you through the whole journey. And this time, we will be in a warm house with a proper midwife, not in a broken wagon during a blizzard." "That is definitely an improvement," Thea agreed with a laugh, pulling him to his feet. "Though I would not trade that night for anything. It brought you into our lives." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and Thea was grateful for Kenneth's constant support and care. He was attentive almost to the point of being overprotective, insisting she rest often and not overdo any physical labor. Benjamin, now a year old, seemed fascinated by his mother's growing belly, patting it gently and babbling nonsense words that Kenneth swore were attempts to talk to his sibling. In March of 1887, Thea went into labor on a beautiful spring afternoon with sunshine streaming through the windows and birds singing outside. The midwife arrived quickly, and Kenneth stayed by Thea's side the entire time, holding her hand and coaching her through contractions just as he had during Benjamin's birth. This time, though, there was no fear or desperation, just anticipation and joy. Their daughter was born just as the sun was setting, her first cries strong and healthy. Kenneth cut the cord himself, then cradled his daughter with shaking hands and an expression of such pure love that Thea started crying. "She is perfect," he whispered. "Absolutely perfect." "What should we name her?" "I thought maybe Catherine," Thea suggested. "After your mother." Kenneth's eyes met hers over the baby's head, and she saw gratitude and love shining there. "Catherine Stone," he said softly. "It is perfect. You are perfect. Thank you, Thea. Thank you for giving me this family, this life. I never dreamed I could be this happy." As the years passed, their family grew even more. Another son arrived in 1889, whom they named Thomas, and a final daughter in 1891, little Margaret. Their house rang with laughter and chaos, with the sounds of children playing and growing and learning about the world. Kenneth's career flourished, and eventually, he and Thea saved enough to buy their own small ranch, fulfilling his long-held dream of having his own place. Benjamin grew into a thoughtful, kind young man who loved horses just like his father. He never knew that Kenneth was not his biological father until Thea sat him down on his 14th birthday and told him the truth about that night in the storm. Benjamin listened carefully, then hugged his mother and said, "He is still my pa. He is the only father I have ever known, and I love him." When he repeated this to Kenneth later, the older man had to turn away to hide his tears. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Kenneth took Thea back to the spot where he had found her wagon that long-ago night. The area looked entirely different in the summer sunshine, peaceful and beautiful rather than threatening and cold. They stood together, his arms around her waist, and looked out at the landscape. "Sometimes I think about that night," Kenneth said quietly, "about how easily things could have gone differently. If I had taken a different route, if I had decided to wait out the storm somewhere else, if I had been just an hour later, you and Benjamin might not have survived. But you did take that route," Thea said, turning in his arms to face him. "You did find us. You did save us. And then you chose to stay, to build a life with us, to be the most amazing husband and father I could have ever imagined. That is not chance, Kenneth. That is fate." "Maybe it was fate," Kenneth agreed, pulling her close. "Or maybe it was just luck. Either way, I am grateful for every single day I get to spend with you and our children. You are my everything, Thea Stone. And you are mine," she whispered, rising on her toes to kiss him. They returned home as the sun was setting to find their 4 children playing in the yard under Mary's watchful eye. Benjamin was teaching Catherine how to rope a fence post, while Thomas and Margaret were having a very serious tea party with their stuffed animals. Kenneth and Thea stood on their porch, watching the scene with contentment settling over them like a warm blanket. "This is what I was searching for all those years," Kenneth said, his arm around Thea's shoulders. "This feeling of belonging, of being exactly where I am supposed to be. I just did not know it until I found you." Thea leaned into her husband's warmth, thinking about the journey that had brought them to this moment. She thought about James and the love they had shared, grateful for the time they had together, but no longer weighed down by grief. She thought about that terrifying night in the storm, about the miracle of Benjamin's birth, about the stranger who had appeared out of the darkness to save them. And she thought about the family they had built together, about the love that filled their home and their hearts. "Do you remember asking me in the wagon if I trusted you?" Thea asked, looking up at her husband. "I do," Kenneth confirmed. "I trusted you then, when you were a complete stranger, because I saw something in your eyes that told me you would do everything in your power to keep us safe. And you did. You have kept that promise every single day since. You have protected us and loved us and given us a life beyond anything I could have imagined. I trust you with my whole heart, Kenneth Stone, and I will for the rest of my life." Kenneth kissed her forehead gently, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "And I will spend the rest of my life being worthy of that trust. I love you, Thea. I love our family. This is all I ever wanted, even when I did not know it was what I needed." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, they called their children inside for dinner. The house filled with noise and warmth as the family gathered around the table, sharing stories about their day, laughing together, simply being together. After the children were in bed, Kenneth and Thea sat by the fire, her head on his shoulder, his hand resting on her knee, and talked about their plans for the future. The years continued to pass in a blur of seasons and celebrations, challenges and triumphs. They weathered hard winters and dry summers, celebrated births and mourned losses in their extended family and community. Through it all, Kenneth and Thea stood together, their love deepening with each passing year, their partnership growing stronger through every trial they faced. When Benjamin fell in love with a rancher's daughter at 22 and announced his engagement, Kenneth welcomed the young woman into their family with open arms and threw a celebration that the whole county attended. He danced with Thea under the stars that night, both of them marveling at how quickly time had passed and how much their family had grown. "Our little baby is getting married," Thea said, tears in her eyes as she watched Benjamin twirling his fiancée around the makeshift dance floor. "He is a good man," Kenneth said proudly. "You raised him well even before I came along, and he chose a good woman just like his father did." "His father's," Thea corrected gently. "James gave him life, but you gave him everything else. You taught him how to be strong and kind, how to work hard and love deeply. You are the father Benjamin needed, Kenneth." As they grew older, Kenneth and Thea became the heart of their family, the ones everyone turned to for advice and comfort. Their ranch was always full of grandchildren who came to visit, to learn how to ride from Grandpa Kenneth, and to hear stories from Grandma Thea about the old days. Kenneth never tired of telling the story of how he found their grandmother during a blizzard, how he delivered baby Benjamin in a broken wagon, how he fell in love at first sight and never looked back. On their 30th anniversary, their children threw them a surprise party with half of Sheridan in attendance. As Kenneth and Thea stood together accepting congratulations and good wishes, he pulled her close and whispered in her ear, "Thank you for saying yes to a wandering cowboy who did not have much to offer except his heart." "You offered me everything that mattered," Thea whispered back. "You offered me love and partnership and a future when I thought mine was over. You are the best decision I ever made, Kenneth Stone." They lived to see all 4 of their children married with families of their own, to hold great-grandchildren in their arms, to celebrate over 50 years of marriage. Kenneth's hair turned silver and his hands developed arthritis, but he still worked the ranch every day until Thea finally convinced him to slow down. She developed a limp from an old injury, but still tended her garden and sewed quilts for every new baby born in their ever-expanding family. One evening in late autumn, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, Kenneth took Thea's hand and laced their fingers together just as he had done thousands of times before. "You know what I thought the first time I saw you?" he asked. "Tell me," Thea said, smiling at her husband of over 5 decades. "I thought you were the bravest person I had ever met. Alone in that storm, in labor, terrified but still fighting. I knew right then that you were someone special. I just did not know yet that you would become my everything." "And I thought you were an angel sent to save me," Thea replied, squeezing his hand. "Then I realized you were even better. You were just a good man who chose to stop and help someone in need. That choice changed everything for me and Benjamin. It gave us you." They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell, their hands still clasped, their shoulders touching, surrounded by the life they had built together. The house behind them was quiet now that it was just the two of them again, but it still held decades of memories, of laughter and tears, of birthdays and holidays, of ordinary moments that added up to an extraordinary life. "No regrets?" Kenneth asked, his voice soft in the gathering darkness. "Not a single one," Thea assured him. "Every choice, every moment, every year has been exactly what it should have been. We found each other in the worst of circumstances and built something beautiful from it. We loved and were loved. We raised 4 amazing children who went on to raise amazing children of their own. We have been blessed beyond measure, Kenneth." "Yes, we have," he agreed, bringing her hand to his lips for a gentle kiss. "Yes, we have." As the years went on, Kenneth and Thea remained devoted to each other until the very end. When Kenneth passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 81, surrounded by his family, Thea held his hand and whispered her love one last time. She mourned him deeply, but found comfort in their children and grandchildren, in the legacy they had built together, in the knowledge that their love story would live on through the generations they had created. Thea lived another 5 years after Kenneth's death, spending her time with her family, telling stories about her cowboy who had appeared in a blizzard and delivered her first baby before stealing her heart. She passed away peacefully with Benjamin at her side, her last words a whisper of her husband's name and a smile on her face. They were buried side by side in the Sheridan Cemetery, their headstone reading simply, "Kenneth and Theodore Stone, together forever." And beneath that, an inscription that Benjamin had chosen. He found her in a storm and loved her through every season after. Their story became legend in Sheridan, passed down through generations of children and grandchildren. The tale of how a wandering cowboy had delivered a baby in a broken wagon during a blizzard, then fell so deeply in love with the mother that he stayed and built a life with her, became the kind of story people told to illustrate that true love really did exist, that sometimes fate put people in exactly the right place at exactly the right time. The ranch that Kenneth had built still stood decades later, owned by Benjamin's grandchildren, who tended it with pride and told anyone who would listen about their great-great-grandparents and the love story that started with a broken wagon wheel and a raging storm. The house had been renovated and expanded over the years, but the original structure remained, a testament to one man's determination to build something lasting for the family he had chosen to love. Every year on the anniversary of that fateful night, the family gathered at the ranch to celebrate and remember. They told the stories again, adding new details that had emerged over time, embellishing the tale slightly, but keeping the heart of it true. A cowboy had found a woman in labor during a blizzard. He had delivered her baby with his own hands. He had fallen in love with both of them and had stayed to build a life that spanned over 50 years and touched countless lives. It was a story of courage and compassion, of love found in the most unlikely circumstances, of choosing to stay when it would have been easier to leave. It was a story that reminded everyone who heard it that sometimes the most important moments in life come when we choose to help a stranger, when we open our hearts to possibility, when we trust in something bigger than ourselves. And in the end, it was a story of a love that lasted a lifetime, that built a legacy, that proved that even in the harshest conditions, love could not only survive but thrive. Kenneth and Thea Stone had found each other in a storm and had created something beautiful and lasting that continued to ripple forward through time, touching lives and hearts for generations to come. Their love story had become legend, but more importantly, it had become a foundation upon which an entire family had been built, a testament to the power of love, courage, and the willingness to take a chance on something extraordinary.